Drodzy Winopijcy, witamy Was z Austrii. Dziś odcinek o Schloss Gobelsburg.
Oglądajcie do końca. Korzystając z okazji tego, że jesteśmy w Austrii i jesteśmy bardzo niedaleko, przyjechaliśmy do Schloss Gobelsburg, który jest
Kultowy.
Kultowy, ale jest producentem jednych z najwspanialszych austriackich win, które uwielbiamy. W związku z tym nie mogliśmy sobie takiej okazji przepuścić.
A Schloss Gobelsburg to jest producent absolutnie legendarny w Austrii, więc musicie koniecznie znać historię tego zamku i koniecznie musicie poznać wina z tej winnicy, a są one po prostu dostępne w Polsce, więc nie jest to żaden problem dzięki importerowi Vininowa.
No to kochani, zabieramy Was do środka, chodźcie z nami w tą niezwykłą podróż.
This is Michi Musbrugger, and you are taking care of Schloss Gobelsburg since few years already. In the 90s you started?
Since 1996.
Yeah. And tell me, what is Schloss Gobelsburg? This is a part of wine history of Austria, I believe.
Well, Schloss Gobelsburg is, in fact, one of the oldest estates of Austria. We're looking back to a documented history of more than 850 years.
Wow.
And the history of this place, of the chateau, is even going further back. So the oldest documentations and findings that we have here are going back to the 16th century before Christ. So the settlement history of this place here goes back already 3,500 years.
Wow. Wow.
But the Schloss is 850 years old.
Well, when you're talking about 850 years, we're talking about the monastic estate.
Yeah, okay.
Because the history of this place is connected to Cistercian monks. In the 12th century, Cistercians were spreading all over Europe, coming from Burgundy. And one of these monasteries was founded just about half an hour from here. And the monks got the first vineyards in 1171. And so since then we do have the written and documented history of the monastic estate.
That was the first plantings and the first vineyards.
Yeah.
And then what is the story of the Schloss itself, of this building?
Well, in the 11th century, so in the Middle Ages, this place used to be a classical fortress of these days. It was then rebuilt into a Renaissance castle in the 16th century, and then was brought into today's form. So like you see it today, around in the mid of the 18th century. Until 1740 it was in private hands. In 1740, when the last private owner had financial problems, the monastery came in and took over the responsibilities here. And you have to imagine that, you know, when in the 12th century the monks started with winemaking, they started on a small scale. But over the centuries they enlarged their vineyards size, and they had in the 18th century already vineyards in Gumpoldskirchen, so in the south of Vienna. They had a big estate in Vienna. They had several places in the north, in the today's Weinviertel. They had several places and press houses and cellars here in the Danube region. But they decided in the late 18th century to establish here at Gobelsburg the central cellar facility for all their wine interests. So from the late 18th century, early 19th century, all the wines came then here to Gobelsburg, and from Gobelsburg they were sold and abroad.
Okay.
So we just visited the new cellar, right? Amazing. What was interesting about it is that you said that in building it you actually had to, or you wanted to, have the monastery impact how it looked, right? Can you tell us a bit about this?
I was studying Cistercian architecture. The Cistercian approach towards architecture is very much linked to their belief. And so architecture is very much in the way of what we recall today in the Bauhaus tradition. So form follows function, you know?
Yeah.
So a very
function is
reduced,
more important.
exactly. beauty is not related to gold and all kind of stuff, but it's related to proportions.
Yes.
You know. So I had the idea that it would be interesting to bring a structural element of the monastery here into the cellars by building a small cloister where you have all the functional rooms of the winery then positioned around it.
This
you
is
know?
amazing.
Amazing concept.
It
We're
looks
actually
like-
standing on top of it right now, right?
Yeah.
So I was on the impression that it's actually very old, you know. So when you told me,
Even
when
if
you-
it's young,
yeah, we
yeah.
came out here and
Yeah.
you told me that it's actually a new build. It's amazing to me because it feels
You know,
very traditional.
you know, when I had my first talks to the architect, I said to him, there's one condition. It has to be able, at least, to be able to last for 500 years.
Okay.
And if you put up these conditions, it has certain consequences.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
For example, you cannot use steel concrete because steel concrete lasts only for 100 years. So this is all handmade. This is why we have been using the old techniques of construction work. Everything is constructed only in brick and in stone. The materials are coming here from the area. We were using the same stone origin as the monastery was built of,
Okay.
for example.
Wow.
Wow.
Let's talk about wines
Yes.
and monks and the history of production of wine. Do we know which were the first vineyards? The first
Settlement.
The first vineyards were situated on Heiligenstein and on Geisberg.
So this is
Exactly.
just over
So just
we
over
just see
here.
them.
Yeah.
And tell me, so the monks were doing wines until some time, and then you took over. What is this story? Why did it happen?
Well,
What is your role in all of that?
That's a good question. You see that where in France and in Germany, the monasteries, due to the time in secularization, due to Napoleon and the French Revolution, were privatized. In Austria, we have a different history towards monks and monasteries. The Habsburg family was a very Catholic family. So Joseph II made a compromise with the monks in the way that he said all the monasteries who were into social activity, because the monasteries, played a big role in the social network in society. So everyone who was into social activity, they could proceed. This is the reason why also the Cistercians of Zwettl continued their work until quite recently, until 1995.
And they were making wine.
Exactly. I mean, the estate was always, one of the most important wineries here in this area, and they felt that it's important to give this winery a future. This is why they decided, to give the estate for a certain time into other hands. I came here into the region, made my apprenticeship in winemaking, and I was looking, for some activity, and so it was coincidence. I always say it's coincidence. The monks claim there is no coincidence.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
How many labels are you making in total?
Well, we're doing about 30 labels, and the biggest part of what we do is the very typical wines here of the region, of the Danube area. And I've brought now one of these wines, which is representing the town of Langenlois. Historically, all the wines in Austria were sold after village names. And Langenlois here is the center of the Kamptal appellation.
This is interesting. So in the past, it wasn't about winemaker, it wasn't about grape variety, it was about the village.
Exactly. So
Totally different approach.
It's a totally different approach. Yeah.
about the village, or let's say origin in general.
Okay. Place. It was about place.
It was about place, exactly. But here we have still wine. This is a wine that is very typical here for the area. It has a nice, decent fruit, a little bit spicy, but not too aromatic.
Yeah.
And important is that this style of wine is a very good food companion. This wine is not Grüner Veltliner, it is a wine that is based on Grüner Veltliner.
Ah, okay.
Ah.
It's not about the personality of a grape variety, this wine. It's based on the personality of the village, on its origin.
I think that this is extremely important and interesting for our viewers, because we always talk about grapes and they want to know about grapes.
Yeah.
And now the place is more important than the grape.
Exactly.
This is the expression
the
of the
terroir,
place.
the place.
Terroir. This is a wine which is not dominating your
Exactly.
palate. This
Yeah.
is like a companion to other things. This is a wine which is not too much aromatic and too much structural in the
There's
the
not
mouth.
too much of anything, so it's
Exactly.
a great balance of acidity. It's a good body. Like everything is
That could
enough,
be-
not too much.
That could be a good husband, you know. These are the characteristics of the good husband to a wife. Yeah. So this is why I like it.
I wouldn't know,
You wouldn't agree.
but I've already had 3 tries because I like it a lot. So, and I'm so happy I can actually drink today.
Drinkable. It's extremely drinkable, and you can have it in Poland without any problems because Vininowa has this
Yes,
wine.
exactly.
Now,
Pour it up.
something very special.
Yes.
Yeah, something very special. We're going now to a single vineyard wine, and this is one of the really special vineyards here in this area.
So this is the reed, right? This is what we.
This is Ried Geisberg, which could be translated into Goat Mountain.
Okay.
Goat Mountain.
Goat Mountain, yeah.
And Heiligenstein, let's say that, it's a mountain of saints. Yes?
It's you could it's
No,
always
Stein. It's stones.
Stones.
well it's always wrong translated because many people say holy stone, but if you translate it properly, it means the rock of the saints.
Okay.
But this
so
is
I
where
was
we are.
close, but
All of
not
this
really.
is
exactly,
all of
yeah.
this is Heiligenstein.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Geisberg is one of these vineyards that
Oh my goodness.
we inherited already since the very beginning,
I'm happy.
1171. So this is very much linked to our history. It's very much linked to our heritage, and it's a vineyard with a very specific soil. It's based on primary rock. So here we have a very crystalline minerality
Oh, yes.
in the wine. This is important to understand. When you come here to the Danube region, then you find these 2 main structures in the vineyards. On one side you have the terraced vineyards, which are dry and high mineralization, so ideal for Riesling production. And then on the other side you find the vineyards that are based on löss, on clay, so
More
vineyards with a
water.
good water supply, ideal for Grüner Veltliner production. Yeah. And this is, as we have those 2 opposing structures, we need the 2 grape variety to cover the needs of the vineyards.
So this is 100% Riesling.
Exactly. It's a wine that has quite some floral aspects. It has a strong perfume, if you could say.
Yeah. But it's
but-
not like Gewürztraminer.
No,
It's not like
Not at
Gewürztraminer, genau, exactly. If you compare to other vineyards like Heiligenstein, you're going here a little bit more to the apricot direction, whereas Heiligenstein is a little bit more on the lemony side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also the difference between the first wine, which was extremely drinkable, and this one. This one has more structure. This one is
Exactly.
more
Yeah.
exigent
Yeah.
from the drinker.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a wine you drink without thinking. It makes you stop a little bit and think about what is happening in the mouth.
Yeah, you have an explosion of taste and the minerality and the acidity, right? It's just like it's overwhelming. You really like in a conversation you'd stop. You'd be like, wow.
Yeah. And there's a kind of density.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's great though.
Father Bertrand always said, you know, when it comes to these wines, he said, well, you know, Michael, Langenlois and Riedlam, these are wines that we drink on a daily basis, you know. But Heiligenstein and Geisberg is our Sunday wine, you know.
It's a special wine.
Exactly, yeah.
And we drink it on Friday. We are so lucky.
This little sign, this 1 ÖTV here in connection with the vineyard name, indicates that this vineyard is rated as a Premier Cru here of this area,
Like in
and
Burgundy.
like in Burgundy, and is a part of the overall best vineyard sites here of this area.
So now Pinot Noir. Is a Pinot Noir a thing in this region, or this is something exceptional?
Well, Pinot Noir is something that the Cistercian monks brought from Burgundy here to
We
this
can
area.
imagine, yeah.
And even though that the Danube area is predominantly a white wine production area, we have a certain amount of vineyards, a certain percentage of vintage of vineyards that are related to the original Danube. You know, the original Danube was not always as regulated as today. So in the past millions of years, the Danube went through very different parts here of the area. We have a certain percentage of vineyards that are related to these Danube sedimentation structures. So you find vineyards with like feast-sized pebbles, and it looks like in the Rhone Valley, you know, like in the Côte du Rhône, and you have a very good drainage here in these vineyards structures, with the result that over the summer months you're getting into early dry stress situation, and this is something that we don't like at all for white wine production. So in these vineyards we're producing red wines.
Okay.
And so here this is one of the examples. Because beside Pinot Noir, we're also producing Saint Laurent and Zweigelt, which are family members of Pinot Noir. And Pinot is a certain identity for Cistercian monks. You know, it always is a kind of a symbol for, you know, where they are coming from.
How do you make it, this Pinot? Is there any oak treatment?
It's a very traditional way of producing red wine. We have wooden fermenters, so like 3,000–4,000 liters, so that you know, during the fermentation, the grapes, we can push them down by hand. After the fermentation, we rack them then into 600-liter casks, because we want to have on one side the advantage of oxidation, of micro-oxidation during the maturing process. But on the other side, we do not want to have too much oak implementation into the wines. Pinot Noir is a very sensitive grape variety, so that reacts very fastly actually on oak and so on. You know, a lot of Pinot producers are flirting, you know, with the comparability to Burgundy. So it's either it's the climate that is similar to Burgundy, or it's the soil that is similar to Burgundy. I can tell you here everything is different to Burgundy.
It's a beautiful wine.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I love it. What is the
Everything about it.
The longevity
Longevity.
of a wine like this?
It's a good question. Tomorrow we will have a 2012, so you can you can compare it. Personally, I prefer currently, or my beloved vintage currently is about 2010. So I think the wines are best to drink and to enjoy maybe so after 8 to 10 years, something like this.
2010.
Yeah.
I know. He's collecting 2010 for his
For my son.
So
really?
he's
Okay.
buying.
Everywhere I go,
Yeah.
I try to get
Okay.
2010. So I'll try to get 2010 from you as well.
So guys, now all we think about is the party Michi is organizing tomorrow
Exactly.
for the 850 years of Schloss Gobelsburg. We are actually invited, so we go
We
there.
can't wait.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having
Yeah.
us.
That was a great explanation.
Thank you for coming, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, it was amazing to actually see the Schloss Gobelsburg itself. You know, after drinking it so long, I mean, like,
Drink
amazing.
Schloss Gobelsburg
Exactly.
in Poland. It's easy to find.
remember, comment below, give us some likes, and drink responsibly, right?
Yeah.
And we'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m.
Don't forget about our patronite,
Yes, don't forget about that.
please.
Bye.